Thank you, Yossi, for that introduction. I appreciate it. I have nowhere to go. So as we just spoke here, LivePerson has been in Israel for 13 years. And today we have over half of our company there. So we're kind of unique. All of our R&D is there. We're not an Israeli company, but Israel means a lot to us. And like I said, it's about half of our population. I'll tell you a funny story, though. When I first came to Israel in 2000 to look at buying this company, I get out of off the airport, and when it was the old terminal, and a taxi driver picks me up, and he says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Moshav Ben Etzion." I'm reading it off a piece of paper. He goes, "Moshav Ben Etzion? Do you have family here?" I said, "No." "Are you Jewish?" I said, "No." He goes, "What are you going to Moshav Ben Etzion for?" I said, to meet a company." "Oh, there's no companies in Moshav Ben Etzion." So, like most Americans that read a lot about the newspaper about Israel, I thought, this is a plot by Hezbollah to kidnap me. I'm a public company CEO. They're going to kidnap me, take me over the border, and then hold me for ransom. So we're in the taxi, and I'm dead serious. I'm thinking, okay, now I have to be really aware. So we're driving up the highway, and we pull into Moshav Ben Etzion, and we go on a dirt road. And I'm like, oh my God, we're on a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. And there's like orange trees and all that. If you've been to the Moshav, you know what I'm talking about. And we pull into this little driveway, and there's a chicken coop with the name of the company. And I'm thinking, this is definitely a setup, right? Like, you walk into the chicken coop, they put something on my head, and they take me out the back. So I told the taxi, I said, please don't leave under any circumstance until I give you the thumbs up. So I walk in, I open the door of the chicken coop, and there's these 3 to 8 people there. And I really gave the thumbs up to the taxi driver. He left. And the one thing I really found endearing about working with Israelis is them as people. Right away, I realized these are a smart group of guys. They were very passionate about what they were doing, and I felt like we could make a good marriage. And it was a real risk to buy their technology. I threw out my technology, and we ended up using that platform 100% for our company, and we built our company based on that. So we're very different than a Cisco or a Google or a Microsoft or even a Yahoo, where they've got these small R&D facilities there. We're really committed to Israel as a country and as a development center. So I come here with kind of an interesting perspective. I'm an outsider with an insider's, I think, view, being there for 13 years. And so I'll say, from my perspective, I think today Israel's greatest threat to its long-term viability is not Syria or Egypt or Iran or even what's going on with the Palestinians. It's the country's belief that it is, as Dan Senor wrote in his now famous book, a startup nation. And like most startups, it kind of lives in this place of survival. And there was this article written in the Jerusalem Post literally 7 days ago by Yitzhak Bronstein, and the title was, "Forget Startup Nation, Please." And he wrote, "An alarming report released by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development has found that Israel suffers from the highest poverty rate among its 34 member states. As if Israel's 20.9% overall poverty rate is not sufficiently shameful, this statistic is worsened by the reality that 1 in 3 children in Israel is living below the poverty line." And he continues, "These findings have prompted a common knee-jerk reaction. What about the startup nation? Don't we have more companies listed on NASDAQ than any other country? Don't we have more companies with patents per capita? How can we possibly finish an embarrassing last place behind Mexico, Turkey, and Chile? Indeed, the startup nation does create wealth, but the nature of the economic model is conducive to the tremendous concentration of wealth. For each typical successful startup exit, there are 2 very small groups of people who obtain the greatest benefit. The initial group of investors, people with enough disposable income to risk investing in startups, and the small group of early employees at the startup." And he continues, This has helped create the absurd reality of modern Israel, an affluent country with over 10,000 millionaires, but with over 150 impoverished citizens for each millionaire. Now, I know about startups. I've been for 18 years building LivePerson. Before that, I had another startup that went under. And I know that living as a startup is all about survival. And for me, I remember what changed my life. Somewhere about, and it was really after I went public, I still had that mentality, but someone came to me and said, it's time to change. And I remember thinking, I no longer think like a survivor, and I have to think more like I can live in abundance. And I will say this, that today, pretty much like every other month, the economic arms of governments like Brazil, China, India, the Ukraine, even Argentina. I met the president of Argentina. She came to speak to public company CEOs who run tech companies, and she said, look, come to our country. We have technology resources. Brazilians, they've been coming to me and saying, we got the best hackers in the world. They can hack anything. And why don't you come here? I heard you got 400 employees in Israel. Why don't you do it in Brazil? And we're cheaper and we've got these great programmers, but more importantly, we don't have war. And you can be safe here. And so if you look from a pure business sense and not from having an altruistic motive like, let's say, to build the state of Israel, but just from a pure business sense, I think there's some real long-term challenges that companies like mine will face in being in Israel. So I'm not here to be negative. I'll continue on my journey. But the first thing is that I'd like to talk about a little bit about the supporting arguments of why people think Israel has to be a startup nation. This is what I hear, once again, from an outsider's perspective. One thing is that, look, we have to live in survival because our neighbors don't like us. Our neighbors want to hurt us. And when you look around the world, though, in this day and age, and you pick up a newspaper, you see a lot of people have enemies. And the fear and the uncertainty of that, I know, is painful for people in Israel. But even here in the United States, when a kid picks up a gun and he shoots 20 people in Connecticut, it creates a destabilizing feeling. It creates a similar feeling to a terrorist act. And I'm not relating the two. I know that may be hard to connect, but all I'm saying is around the world, everyone has enemies. The second thing is that I hear, well, Israel's small. It's 8 million people. This is a small country. But if you look at a country like Singapore, it has 5 million people. And if you look at Singapore's history, it was originally part of the British Empire. It then became part of the Malaysian country. And then in the 60s, it got its independence. And it's had a fear of living with the Malaysians just above it. And it said, though, instead of looking at it fear and looking at that with uncertainty, we are going to change and we are going to build a global country. We are going to build a country that has some of the best airlines, telcos, and banks in the world. And it has the same GDP as Israel today. Okay, so it's focus. And the third thing that I always hear is that, hey, we're not good marketers. We're terrible salespeople. We build these companies, but we're not really good at selling. And I hate to say it, but when I'm in Israel, every time I go into like an electronics shop and I come out, I buy more than I want to, and then I'm guilted into the feeling that I didn't pay enough. So I can't help to think that, I feel that Israelis are in essence good salespeople. You can see it around here. I can't help, I walk in the hallways, I get pulled by someone every 2 minutes telling me, here, buy my company. And so the thing is, like what's the Jerusalem Post just wrote, is this thinking has created a certain mentality, and that's about building of companies in Israel. There is a startup mentality, and I'll tell you what the challenge of that is. First of all, companies sell way too early in Israel. I bought 5 companies in Israel. We have spent about $70 million in acquisitions in Israel. And if we take the first company we bought that was on Moshav B'netzion, we spent $7 million for that company. If they waited only 7 or 8 years, they would have gotten about $80 million for their company. Okay? But that's not the most important thing, because that still is about concentration of wealth. What I see is that if you have a mentality of a startup, you don't think about building world-class companies. And if we don't build world-class companies in Israel, then we can't take care of those people around there who need help. We can't employ more people. We can't get more people out of poverty. So what Israel needs is a framework for large world-class companies. The other thing that large world-class companies does is that it creates a framework for people to leave and create other ones. They're working in big companies, they see it works, and they'll go start up and they'll build bigger companies, and that will, I think, protect Israel into the future. But what I hear a lot about is, hey, even LivePerson, you're really big, so it's hard to innovate. So I think there's just got to be a little bit of a mind shift that companies like Google and Apple, they can innovate when they're big. So for me, Israel has the DNA. It's got the intelligence. It has the drive, but it's about really being, I think, more of a global view. So I think the crossroad, there's a couple crossroads that I'd like to point out, and here they are. One is, will Israel now focus on being a global country versus being a country of survival, like a country like Singapore? Will it remain a religious state? I think this is a big debate somewhere in the future, which is it's not inclusive. And I think it's important that, like in the United States, the model's not perfect, but it's good to be inclusive of people. Will entrepreneurs go beyond being startups to really thinking about building big companies? And the last part is, will the political leaders change their view and stop throwing the country into this place of, we've got to survive and think about we got to be global citizens? And I've seen this for 13 years. There's always something going on in Israel. Every time I travel, my mother says, look, did you see what's going on in Gaza? Are you safe? I'm like, yeah, it's no problem. And sometimes so I feel like the government uses it as a way to sort of bind its people, where I feel like when you really look at the enemies of Israel today, the Brazilians, the Indians, and the Ukrainians, the Chinese, I think they're the people who really could severely hurt Israel. And an Iron Dome will not protect Israel from those people. They want the jobs of the Israelis. Everybody wants to be an IT leader, and they are looking at Israel as the model. They're going to educate their people, and they're going to get them involved with technologies to try to take that business. So the question is, companies like LivePerson, I think we have an important part of Israel, and I want to stay there. And I want to bring a global aspect to what Israel has to offer. So like many of you here, I have a vested interest in Israel's success. I don't want to leave. And I want to keep growing our employee base. So I believe that, the people in this room, we're not elected officials, but we're citizens. And whether you're a citizen like me, I don't hold a passport of Israel, but I am a citizen of Israel. And I have 400 employees who are citizens. I think we are the people who can really make the change and change the thinking and bring our perspective of being more global to that country. So I think our goal should be to shed the belief that Israel is a startup nation living in survival and have it truly become a global and open country to live in. So thank you.